So, shall we begin with the refuge? We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. We go for refuge to all the Buddhas, so that all sentient beings may realize Buddhahood. So the topic for today is Sheila. That's Sanskrit for, and this is where we translators are not quite sure how to translate it. It's sometimes translated as morality, or discipline, or moral discipline, or ethical conduct, or puts you in the ballpark. Morality, did I say? But it's not exactly what, it doesn't, none of those words actually cover exactly the full meaning of Sheila or the kind of connotations of Sheila. So that's why we'll keep resorting back to Sheila. In Tibetan it's Sutim. Some of us have got the name Sutim. It was my name once, one of my names. My mum's name was Sutim. And of course Sutim Jamsal, Ocean of Sutim, Ocean of Sheila is Khenpo Rinpoche's name. So we were last time we were talking about generosity and how that related to openness and energy exchange in the mandala. And it comes kind of first in the list, as it were, but actually each of these 6 paramitas, or perfections as they're called, imply the others and are inseparable from the others, just like openness, clarity and sensitivity. They sort of sound different, but then when you go more deeply into them, they're actually the same thing. It's another way of talking about the same thing. So you can have the Sheila of generosity and the generosity of Sheila. You know, they're kind of, when you're practicing generosity, it can also be your practice of Sheila. When you're practicing Sheila, it's also your practice of generosity. So I think it's good to bear that in mind. You could say the Buddhist context, well, it's all about what actions bring about good karma and what bring about negative karma. So therefore, what's skillful and what's not skillful. And then it can be laid down as kind of quite definite. You know, these actions will have a bad effect and these actions will have a good effect. And that's kind of basically what Sheila is about in its sort of crudest form, perhaps. But that doesn't carry part of the meaning, which is quite important. As last time I was looking at the dual ornament of liberation, I was looking at what Gampopa's chooses to say about it. I mean, there's so much one could say about it, but what he's got in his chapter on that perfection of, what do we call it here? Moral ethics. It's the same thing, isn't it? What was I going to say? Oh yes, the definition of it being includes the taking of a definite commitment or a precept from somebody, which, you know, our words of ethics and morality and so on don't carry any connotation like that. But there's this definite formalization, and of course it links to the work we do on pranidhanas, the power of our word. So it's very much connected to the power of our word. And our power of our word is our power to choose and decide what we're going to do. So we have intention, but this is, deliberate intention. And it's the Sheila based on the deliberate intention of, you could say, commitment or vow or precept or anything along those lines, to act in a certain way, and of course, skillful way. And skillful here means that it's conducive to your own and other beings' happiness. So that's the connotation that goes with Sheila, that it's a means to happiness. And I think that our words for morality and ethics and discipline are sort of more about getting it right or getting it wrong. So there's a much more sense of you're being judged according to this standard of morality or ethics that's there. Whereas the Buddhist, the whole weight and ethos, the whole sort of associations of the word are with means to happiness. So to not practice Sheila, you're going to suffer. To practice Sheila, you're going to have good fortune, you're going to have, everything's going to work out fine, you're going to be happy, you're sowing the seeds of happiness. Great, lucky you, well done. I rejoice in what you're doing, because then I get some of that Sheila myself. I get some of that benefit myself by rejoicing in what you're doing. So there's a lot of ease around the idea of Sheila, which is sometimes in contrast to what happens in the West, because we're tending to think in terms of what's the right thing to do, and am I doing it? Kind of, I could be a bad person if I did the wrong thing, and I have done the wrong thing, so I am a bad person. And how can I, there's nothing I can do about it because now I've done this bad thing. So then we have this thing called guilt. I feel bad about myself because I did something wrong, so I'm bad, and nothing can make that different because I did do it. And that's the kind of trap that we get into in the West, which the whole framework of how you think in the Buddhist system is much more forgiving, much kinder, because it's all about happiness. And if you do something that is conducive, that will lead to suffering, then it's a matter of doing something that will mitigate the effects of that, and then doing things that will lead to happiness. So that it puts power into your hands. You have the power, you have the choice all the time. There's never a time that you can't make that choice. And this is the road, this is a necessary foundation for following a path to liberation. You have to be able to choose it. You have to be able to, there can't be a question that there's something wrong with you, so therefore you can't do it. It's just not an option. You can do it if you do the right actions, and you can choose to do the right actions. When I say right, I mean the actions that will lead to happiness and liberation. So I find that really interesting. It's fascinated me for years, the way Westerners think about morality. I mean, I've listened to some of these programs by philosophers talking about ethics and morality, and been quite surprised at how woolly, to my mind, their definition of it seems to be. It could be quite interesting to talk more about that. I think the way we think about morality and ethics and the right things to do, what we should do, tends towards thinking about an ideal. What should I ideally do? What would be the ideal thing to do? What would be, is it right to kill? It's either right or it's not right. So, if it's absolutely right, then if I do kill, that's really kind of failed at my ideal. Or whereas in the Buddhist context, it would be killing has consequence, and the consequence is negative for yourself and for others. Sometimes you have a choice. which is the better of two evils? Well, you've got the pros and cons of both, and you make your choice and you accept the consequences of both. It's not a matter of you failed at your ideal. It's that you've taken on the consequences of an action that is not conducive to happiness. So that, if you do decide to break the precept against killing, for example, because you feel, when you weigh up the pros and cons of protecting human life and protecting vermin, destroying vermin, sort of now rather than later kind of attitude, you're taking on that karma. If you decide in terms of, protecting human life by killing, you take on the karma of killing. So what do? If you've got the karma of killing? Well, you repent it, you save lives, you make lots of pranidhanas about being born in a world where you don't have to kill in order to protect life and stuff. So there's a lot you can do, having taken on the responsibility of having done a certain action. And it's not the same sense of, well, you've got an ideal against killing and now you've killed, so now, you should feel guilty. You should feel bad. Well, that doesn't get you anywhere. Sometimes I think the Dalai Lama has said sometimes, I don't understand, what's this guilt thing that Westerners have? And I think it springs from this whole contextual way of thinking that is absent in the West, so that we tend to go down a sort of self-destructive route because of this idealism and our sense of failure when we can't live up to it, and also laying it on each other, like parents lay it on children, and like, well, you're failing to match up to my ideals, so there's something wrong with you. So I think it becomes quite insidious and pervasive, and it also leads to the idealism also leads to fundamentalism, because it's so uncomfortable not knowing what is the ideal. Let's decide, this is the ideal, this is the proper way, this is right. And if we stick to this rule and we stick to this pattern and we stick to doing this, keeps things simple. If you don't live up to that, then you're out, or you're the enemy, or you're not really human. You can go a long way in rejecting those who don't live up to your ideal. So I think it's all connected somehow. That kind of keeping to rules and rigidity in order not to have to suffer the painfulness of not knowing what to do. Is this, if I'm doing something wrong, then I'll actually suffer from this guilty feeling. But if I can actually justify it as it's not wrong, then I can be self-righteous and I can be safe and simple and I'm a good person. So it leads to all kinds of funny ways of thinking from the Buddhist point of view, that unfamiliar ways of thinking. And I think often because of the way translations work, teachers from Buddhist countries are not aware of these kind of complications that are going on because of the connotations and associations with the words that are used as translations for words that are actually quite different. I find all of that very, very interesting, I must say. So the Buddhist context, you've got the idea of skillful action that leads to happiness for yourself and others, or you could say positive karmic outcome. And there's a different rules of thumb, I might say. You could say 3 levels at which you might be practicing. So what's you're advised to do depends on what level you're practicing at. So it's more like what is it? I had this idea once to set up a karmic advice agency so that people could come and sort of talk about what they were thinking to do and what the karmic advisor would tell them would, you know, what the issues would be and how they could deal with it. A bit like these fatwas in the Islamic tradition, you know, get a judgment on what the advisor would say about your karma. So there are 3 sort of levels at which this advice might be given. The first level is restraint. So you look at the negative actions. I'll just run through the standard list, although there's endless variations on each. So the 5 precepts I'm sure you're all familiar with: not killing, not stealing, not lying, no sexual, it's almost like sexual abuse, not causing suffering through your sexual activity, and not drunkenness or any kind of intoxication that might lead to suffering. So drink and driving would be a good example of that. And sometimes it's listed as 10. I mean, there's lots of different lists in the Buddhist sutras and scriptures. That these are the ones that are used mostly in our tradition at the moment. So sometimes they're listed as 10, 3 of the body. So killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct is the body ones. Interestingly, it doesn't include hitting people or beating them or doing anything to them. It just says either killing them or. So I think, you know, there's room for more in there. And then there's 4 of speech, which is very interesting. That there's a lot of emphasis put on speech because we can do so much more harm with our speech than we can with our body, actually. Typically, we can really destroy each other's lives by our speech. Just a few words, and you know, we can really destroy people's reputation. We can destroy their career. We can turn their friends against them. There's so much we can do with our speech that we couldn't do with our body, actually. So it's really interesting that there's 4: lying, abusing, and divisiveness, and idle talk, which is a very interesting one. Idle talk, which leads to no good. You know, leads to no good, leads to suffering for yourself and others. And as Khenpo Rinpoche always says, joking isn't idle talk. It's good. It has a good effect. Things, you know, makes people laugh and feel happy. So, but idle talk in the sense of destructive talk and meaning, not only meaningless, but you know, it's really distracting us away from genuine communication and connection. It's kind of, yeah, destructive in various ways. And then 3 of the mind, which are ill will, you know, deliberate ill will. I think it's obvious that causes suffering for yourself and others. And then basically envy, but it's just like wanting what you haven't got, even if it doesn't belong to anyone else. You know, that state of mind where you're never satisfied. You always want something else that you haven't got, or someone else has got, or is unattainable, or, you know, you're kind of, you know, really. So it's a choice to not be satisfied. And of course, the sign of a good practitioner is they're easily satisfied. Yeah, easily satisfied. It's a very nice. I think it sounds nice in English too, doesn't it? Certainly Tibetans, you know, when they say Chok Shepa, Chok Shepa, very, really good person, Chok Shepa, you know, easily, you know, satisfied, happy. And then non-dharmic thinking, obviously, if you're thinking in a way that's against the Dharma, you're going to do actions that are going to lead to your own suffering and sufferings of others. So it's not a sort of dogmatic statement of, you know, wrong views. You've got to lie, you know, shape up and have the right view. It's just, if you hold certain views, then you're going to make negative karma. So it's obvious it's going to cause you suffering, it's going to cause others suffering. So those kind of views that bring about suffering, like fundamentalist views that everyone else is wrong and don't deserve to be treated like human beings, would be a typical example. could say that's ill will, but you might not have any ill will. It's just you might believe that very strongly. Think you're doing the world a favor by destroying certain kinds of people. And you don't feel it's ill will because you're doing it, because that's right. That's how it should be. So wrong views are very powerful. So those are the basic things that we restrain ourselves from engaging in, those kinds of actions that are going to lead to suffering for ourselves and others. Sometimes that's referred to as the Hinayana discipline, but I don't find that term adds anything to the meaning, so I don't bother to use it. It's and then the opposite of all those actions, I think you can see the opposites, they will have a natural opposite. So protecting life, generosity, truthfulness, using your sexuality to bring happiness to yourself and others, and remaining sober so that you don't don't do things that you then regret because you weren't in your right mind. The same with all the other 10. The first 3 are already the same. Killings, looking after, protecting life. Stealing would be generosity and giving. Sexual misconduct or abuse would be replaced by using your sexuality in a good way. Then the speech ones, the lying is the same, telling the truth. Abuse would be speaking gently and kindly, friendly. Divisiveness would be about speaking in such a way as to bring about harmony and protecting people's reputation and not talking about their faults unnecessarily and that kind of thing. And speaking meaningfully. And we've been talking about that a lot in our sort of training recently, awakening dialogue and mentoring and so on, that you use your speech to connect with other people in a way that leads to mutual nurturing and enjoyment. Ill will, of course, replace the opposite of that's goodwill, which is, you can't get enough of that. And the envy is, I've already mentioned, the opposite would be the being satisfied, easily satisfied and contented. And non-dharmic thinking would be replaced by having views that are in harmony with Dharma in the sense that they bring about happiness for yourself and others, and eventually ultimate happiness of liberation from samsara. So those are the kind of the opposite. Gampopa defines Sheila in terms of these, classifies, yes. Moral, the restraint, and then the second one, the positive side would be called accumulating virtuous Dharma, which is really clumsy turn of phrase in English, but sounds really nice in Tibetan. It's called soksak dipjang, which is a shorthand way of saying practicing Dharma, which means accumulating that's good and removing everything that's negative. So you're practicing Dharma. Oh, soksak dipjang, yapo, very good, very good. That's what we all need to be doing. Whereas accumulating virtuous Dharma doesn't quite have any ring to it at all, really, does it? Kind of, the translators, they've really got a problem there to find a turn of phrase that captures the place that expression has in the whole conceptual framework. So it looks like fun rather than rather clunky. So that's what that would be called. That would be the positive side of what you're restraining yourself from doing. And then the morality of benefiting sentient beings, which is now you've gone up a step. So if you're just practicing following the rules, as it were, of what actions are going to be, what you're suggesting, these are positive actions, these are negative actions, avoid those, do as much as you can of the others. That's the kind of one level of practice, which in a sense, you don't need to take a great deal of responsibility about that. You're just working on that, on the simple, principle that positive actions will have positive results sooner or later. So it's always good to not kill. It's always good to save life, whatever. So, okay, if you don't kill the rats, that's good because you're not killing. Okay, it may actually lead to a lot of problems, but then that isn't your karmic responsibility, because you didn't make them be a pest. You just respected their life and didn't kill them. So in a way, you've kept your karma pure. You haven't done anything that will have a negative karmic effect. So what's happening when you decide you are going to kill? You're actually choosing if you like, a higher level of ethical behavior, or if you're going to use that word, ethical, because now you're looking at what you're actually having to make a judgment yourself. You're not just going by what you've been advised. You're now taking the law into your own hands, and you're thinking, I think it's better to save human lives and take care of human lives, and I don't see there's any benefit in allowing these vermin or whatever it is to increase, because the problem will just get bigger and bigger. So you're kind of taking the law into your own hands. What's the key thing here is, what is your motive? So if you're genuinely doing it as a way to protect human life, and you genuinely regret doing the killing, then actually you make good karma from trying to really benefit others, and you make good karma for your regret of doing this negative action. So you're actually making a lot of good karma, even though you're also making bad karma. And also you are acting sort of beyond your level in a way. You're not really in the position to be able to see whether this is ultimately the most beneficial thing to do. You're making this decision from a state of fundamental ignorance. You can't really do it because you can see, like a bodhisattva or a Buddha might be able to see, this is the best way to benefit all of them for forever. You can't really see that. So there's some negative karma about acting out of beyond your level, as it were. Nonetheless, it isn't a totally negative situation. There's a lot you can do working within that situation. So being aware that you've actually upped a level, it's risky. It's risky, but you've decided you're going to do it, and you're doing it because it's risky. You're only going to do it really if you think this is actually most beneficial for yourself and others, for bring about the happiness of self and others. And you make lots of pranidhanas for everybody involved, so that the outcome of this karma will be as beneficial as possible. So like if you're doing a very strong action like killing something, you would think you would make very strong pranidhanas for them, that you in future lives, when you have this connection ripens in future, that it will be a good connection, and it will lead to that being liberated, and you will always be able to help them on the path, and make all those kind of pranidhanas. And with any luck, I say luck, as karma works out, you might find in a future life you have a class of students who you are actually able to benefit, but they give you an awful lot of trouble. And that could be the result of your action, but nonetheless it's a workable situation because of the way you did it. So it's quite so it's kind of a more mature approach in a way. You could be the simple-mindedness, well, I'm not going to kill whatever happens, sort of just let the situation go. It's a choice, but it might not be, your choice. You might think, well, I think we can do better. I think, I take the law into my own hands in a sense, and I take that responsibility. And this is what a bodhisattva is advised to do. This would be the bodhisattva discipline, if you like, and it contrasts with the Shravaka discipline, or the discipline of just restraint or accumulation. This is now, kind of growing up, and you could say it's more pragmatic in many ways, but it's only pragmatic if your motive is good. Because, if you took the view, well, it's up to me what I do, and your motive is just careless, you don't really care about certain forms of life, then you will make even more bad karma. So it's quite a painful one, that. And you can't be so self-righteous. Like you can be quite self-righteous. Oh, well, I never kill. You could have then make the bad karma of pride when you judge other people, so there's risks. Nonetheless, it's you would be right. You weren't killing, and you took a vow not to kill, and you're not killing. That will bring a very good result. There's no doubt. So it's interesting, isn't it? This sense that there's a hierarchy here. And then the third kind of level, the third level, is quite surprising. I'm using the word here, transgressional, where you actually have reached the stage where your practice has reached a level where you need to give up your attachment to habitual patterns of thinking about right and wrong, and move into a kind of a way of acting that's usually translated as spontaneous, which is quite a good translation, except in English, spontaneous could mean all sorts of things. But it means action that doesn't involve any conceptual thinking. So it's at a very high level. And a yogin who's developing this has got to drop all his habitual patterns of thinking about how he's going to act, and simply rest in the non-conceptual jnana that he's realized or realizing, and act from there. And this is spontaneously, without any interference, any conceptual interference. And this gets written about a lot in sort of Western Buddhist circles, as if that's how you should behave. You shouldn't have any judgments. You should just act spontaneously, in the moment, just knowing what to do without getting in the way. And that sounds very attractive, but it's very dangerous, actually, because if you haven't arrived at that level and you start trying to act spontaneously as you might think it is, it could actually simply be driven by your habitual patterns and judgments, and what you're calling not thinking is actually just that. You're not thinking, but whenever we think we're not thinking, of course we are thinking. We've just got this idea, well, it doesn't matter, which is a thought. We might not even voice that to ourselves, but nonetheless, there's that, we do call that, you think it doesn't matter. And I never thought that, but you did. But you didn't call it that. But it is exactly what, you were driven by this thought. So spontaneous activity is amazing, and quite often transgressional in the sense that it's shocking, because the yogin will do something, like the story of Tilopa biting the heads off fish and cooking them live, or something awful he was doing. And that would be a typical, then Naropa was totally shocked. And, Tilopa finished cooking them, and then he just threw them back in the stream and they swam off. He was at that level where it's all illusion, and he was just showing Naropa, don't be attached to your preconceived ideas of right and wrong when you're looking at a yogin, like, a realized yogin. There's many stories like that. Lots of stories of Guru Rinpoche like that, doing these doing things that, you think you shouldn't do that. And it turns out that it's beneficial for everyone. So that is actually, you're moving into the world of magic now, into the world of it's like a magical illusion, and you can play with the magic of the illusion, and you can do really surprising things that are beneficial in very surprising ways. So this is often associated with tantric practice or Vajrayana practice, but I don't like to put it like that, because all sorts of things are called tantric and Vajrayana practice in Tibetan Buddhism that are, not at that level. So generally speaking, even if you're practicing in Tibetan Buddhism and it's called Vajrayana, you need to keep your Sheila well within the two other levels, and not think, oh, that means I'm going to now practice, like these great yogins of the past. You just look at their dreadful behavior and you think, wow, I can't tell. I just can't tell. I wouldn't know if that was good or bad, because, if I saw someone frying fish alive, that would be bad. I can't see that's beneficial to anyone. And yet, presumably it was beneficial. Presumably that gave those fish, maybe they became siddhas just like that. I don't know what happened. So generally in Tibetan society, they're very good at being able to accommodate the idea that they can't judge somebody who's at a very high level of realization. I mean, they do, but they do also know that, they're risking themselves making bad karma, because they don't actually know what level this person's at. So they will make comments like that, where, you talk about the bizarre behavior of, like, for example, Trungpa Rinpoche did some quite bizarre things. And, every Tibetan I know would say, well, what can you say with a siddha like Trungpa Rinpoche? Far from me to say anything, even though they would actually not like that kind of behavior, and they wouldn't feel comfortable with it. Nonetheless, they would recognize they're not in a position to judge. But because in the West we don't have a cultural sense of who's at that level and who isn't at that level, these kind of letting people off the hook with this kind of excuse is a bit of it's an issue. You might start applying it to people, in a way you need to make a judgment that this isn't good behavior, and yet you're being told, perhaps by their very devoted disciples or maybe your companions, or what you just have to accept it because this is a siddha, and you think, oh dear, yeah, it's true, I don't know. So what do? Well, you find a place where you actually feel comfortable. So you might find you have to distance yourself from that whole scene because you don't feel comfortable with it. And then you might say, well, actually you might be missing a great opportunity, because, this is a great siddha. And you judge for yourself. You think, yes, if I had the faith, then staying around would be good, but I find I don't. And that's what you say. And, when I'm speaking to Tibetans, this is what they would say, it's what I might say. Such and such a lama, he's supposed to be a great lama, and he's behaving in such a way, and we might say to each other, yeah, I don't have faith. No, I don't have faith either. Kind of, we're not, it makes it very clear that we're not going to be party to all of that, but it's not, we can't really say whether that's simply because we don't have faith or because there is something fishy about the whole thing. We don't have to make a decision beyond our capacity to make a decision about who's got what kind of realization. But among Tibetans themselves, there is a lot of consensus. If you know the right people, the people who are practitioners, and you know what sort of level of they're practicing at, and you ask them about other people, you can get a very clear idea of where people are very likely to be, actually. It's what I call the yogic network. You know, you check out, I've heard of such a person, you know, and he's supposed to be so and so and so and so, and he's doing this, that, and the other. Ah, yes, right. And you think, oh, right, okay, so that's obviously not some high siddha, because if he was a well-known siddha, they would say, ah, yes, what can one say about somebody at that level of realization? I think, oh, right, okay. But it's quite, it's much clearer than one might think, and I sometimes feel very sad about the way Westerners are misled by a lot of hyperbole about people being enlightened and being, you know, sort of very high, this, that, and the other, and they've got no way to check whether that is in any way likely to be, you know, reliable or not, because we just don't have that, you know, access to that network. But anyway, I'm digressing. Didn't mean to go there. Maybe there's a reason. So going back to Gampopa, he starts off by saying, what are the great benefits of Sheila? So I had to digress by telling you a bit about what Sheila was in the first place, otherwise it wouldn't make any sense to talk about its benefits. So it's quite interesting, the images that are used for Sheila are feet. They're like the feet that take us from A to B. If we're going to go anywhere, we need feet. If we're going to go anywhere, we need to be able to say, this is what we're going to do, and know we're going to follow it through, which is basically what Sheila is. You know, if you can't follow through what you say you're going to do, you're not going to go anywhere, basically. You haven't got any feet. So once you can, you know, you train to do whatever, and obviously it's applying to what's skillful, you train to do what you say you're going to do and carry it through, and then you know, and also the world knows, other people know, that you are reliable. When you say you'll do it, you will do it. You know, obviously, you know, there are times when circumstances prevent it, but they know that as to the extent that you will be able to do it, you will do it. And you know it too. So it's like, and to break that, it's quite a nice image. It's like breaking your leg. You can't go anywhere anymore because you've broken that kind of ability to do what you say you're going to do and deliver, as it were. So once you've got that power of Sheila, it saves you from negative karma, because so then it saves you from the lower realms, because you can decide not to do something and you won't do it. It allows you to be open to the Dharma, because when you open up to the Dharma, you will follow it through. It allows you to progress spiritually, and it will actually is your means to liberation. You have to have this ability to choose your direction and follow it through with all those kind of, you know, like with determination, intention, you know, with commitment, reliability, all those kind of qualities are what give you the power to liberate yourself from samsara. So you have to get this right first, that you do have that power. So then Gampopa then goes on to talk about the result. It's quite interesting that on the one hand he says, well, the result of practicing Sheila is that you get a good rebirth in which you will be able to practice Dharma. Obviously here the Sheila is very closely connected to the kind of pranidhana you're making, what kind of wishing prayer or aspirations you've got. So if you want to reach complete and perfect awakening, you have to aim for it. So that's why at the beginning of every session, take refuge to all the Buddhas in order to bring all beings to complete and perfect awakening. Okay, that's where we're going. We never lose sight of that. If you're aiming for if you want to get to the moon and you only aim to, you know, reach the top of a mountain, you won't reach the moon because you're aiming at the wrong thing. You might think, well, it's on the way to the moon. Yes, but if you want to get to the moon, aim for the moon, and don't forget you're aiming for the moon. You know, don't forget you're aiming not just for happiness in this life, not just for lots of happy future lives to come, but for complete and perfect awakening, not just for yourself, not just for a few beings, for all beings. That covers the whole area. That's my vision. That's where I'm going. I'm not going to stop until this has been accomplished. And there's so much power in that. I mean, it's just one line. But every time I say it, I almost go tingly. Well, I don't almost go tingly every time I say it, but quite often when I'm saying it, I do feel quite tingly because of it's such a vast intention. It's just like all beings, complete awakening. You know, it sounds ridiculous from where I am now, but if I don't aim for it, I won't get there. I have to believe in it and aim for it, and it's for the sake of all beings, leaving out none. And Tibetans are really good at this. They really recognize the power of that thought. I think, you know, if you learnt nothing else in your life, just that would be worth living this life for, to just have that really firmly in mind. That's where I'm going, and I'm not stopping till I get there. If you think like that, you will get there. There's no doubt. In principle. And in practice, I believe. So don't aim low. Interesting thought, isn't it? Because one part of me would think, well, I should aim at something that's more attainable, more doable, something I could do, you know. And then when I get there, then I could think of having another aim that's a bit further. Whereas this is the opposite way of thinking. No, have the biggest thought first, and then you could think about the smaller steps to get there. So the result of having that wish behind everything you do would be definitely you would get another precious human birth. So that's the connection with Sheila. If you call it morality or ethics or something, you don't get the power of what is being said here. It's if you have an intention and you name it and you say it in front of, especially if you say it in front of people who have that, who are keeping that already. You know, so if you say, you make that bodhisattva vow, or you take some precept against killing or so on, from somebody who's keeping it, then there is some power in the fact they're keeping it. And that power, you know, is an energy exchange. And then when you make that vow in front of them, then your vow is empowered by their vow and their Sheila. Sheila is very powerful, and you can, the power of it can be sort of imbibed almost, you know, it's like energy exchange. By admiring the Sheila of another, the power of their Sheila empowers you. So this is, you know, in the 7-branch prayer where you rejoice in the good done by others. It's a very good practice because you actually do get power yourself by rejoicing in the good done by others, rejoicing in their Sheila. So you could make that your one practice, really. Think of everybody who's doing really, really good and think, oh, that's so wonderful. That is so wonderful. And you can actually feel yourself being empowered by thinking about it, actually. You can feel it changing you. It's a really important practice. So one of the results is you get this precious human birth again, the opportunity to practice Dharma again. And this lovely word leisure, this precious human birth that we have now, because we're able to hear and practice the Dharma and meet teachers, and we have leisure, dalwa. which means that we are free enough to train ourselves and to practice Dharma. We're not so preoccupied with the just the mere survival to be able to think about greater things. What we actually have time. We have time now in this life, and it's really vital that we don't waste it. It's very easy to just take our time for granted. Oh, what should I do with my time? You know, I could do this, I could do that, and oh, I've never done this, and oh, I've never done that, and then your life's finished. So what? You did all those things. So what? I was a bit astonished when people say that, you know they're going to die, so they try to get in and do as many things as they can that they didn't do before they die. And I think, but then when you're dead, what good will that have done you? You'll be dead. Why don't you, what you should be thinking about is your onward journey. What will help me in my future journey? I know I'm going to die soon. That kind of galvanizes me to think, okay, make sure I use my time well to set myself up for where I'm going. So we might as well think that now, since we might die very soon. I know I was talking to somebody once and they said, well, I like to think about now rather than the future. I thought, so you think death is future? You'd actually have no idea. I mean, it's not future. It's completely unknown. I mean, as you get older, it becomes more obvious that you're not going to live for another 100 years, but you know for sure it's not going to be very long. But even when you're young, you don't know. You don't know. It could be today, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be a few months. You just don't know. You can't afford to waste it while you've got the chance to use your time, to use it to make sure that, well, it's a nice expression in Tibetan, which is plant the roots of goodness. I really like that, kushala mula. While you've got the chance, sort of sow the seeds that will actually ripen in the future as a path to awakening and the ending of all suffering for yourself and all beings. Plant them now. You can't afford to wait. And we can plant them now. People think, oh, I have a very busy life. I don't have time to practice Dharma all the time. As I keep saying, it's not true. You've got every moment of your day to practice Dharma. You can be practicing generosity, kindness. You can be practicing Sheila. You can be practicing patience. You can be practicing, moments of awakening, moments of coming back to pay attention. You could be taking refuge any time during the day. It's just there's not a moment that you could honestly say you haven't got time to practice Dharma. It's like it's an attitude of mind, really. Practicing Dharma is really an attitude of mind. And once you've set yourself up to turn your whole life into Dharma practice, you'll be very pleased you did that. Yeah. So, it does help a lot to be able to do formal things like retreats and coming to teachings and things that are, listening, reflecting, and meditating on Dharma is great for, really deepening your understanding and your determination and your orientation. There's nothing like it. But nonetheless, it isn't true, and you need to know it's not true, that you don't have time to practice Dharma. Of course, we forget, don't we? Get involved in things and then forget. But that's an opportunity for remembering. When you've forgotten, there'll be a moment when you remember, and that's your moment to really get your weight behind remembering and make a very strong pranidhana that you won't forget so much. Just making a pranidhana is really powerful Dharma practice. So Pranidhana is this word we're using for making a very strong aspiration to do something. Okay, so Sheila turns out to be the basis for all happiness. This is the words that Gampopa is using. It's like a ground. So it's not just feet, it's also ground. It, allows you to make your choice to either move or be still at any particular point. I rather like that. You can choose. It's the ground from which you can decide whether to act or not. It's to be still or to move. It's a fertile ground. Like all good qualities arise from Sheila, because that's the basis of being able to make good karma. And it's also the basis for meditation. We tend in the West to teach meditation as a kind of isolated thing, that meditation is a good thing to do, and maybe sort of secular. You don't have to have any kind of other framework. Whereas traditionally, you wouldn't be taught meditation straight away. You'd be taught about generosity and about Sheila, especially Sheila. Then you have the basis for practicing meditation in a way that will bring about a positive result for yourself and for others, because first you have to establish that intention and why you're doing it and how you're doing it, and then when you meditate it will definitely have a positive effect. It's quite interesting, isn't it? Like Sheila is taking control of your destiny, you could say, almost. And the other advantage, one of the other results is that because you have Sheila, you can accomplish your pranidhanas. So that the two go very strongly in hand. And then there's a nice quote from the Meeting of the Father and Son Sutra I've never heard of before. Yes, for one who keeps pure Sheila, all aspiration prayers will be accomplished. So that's a good thought, isn't it? Yeah. And then there's other examples of your pranidhanas being fulfilled. You'll meet Buddhas, you'll adorn the world, you'll be a source of joy, and you'll be praised. This often comes up as a good result. You'll be praised by gods and by men. You'll impress the Nagas, you'll impress the non-human beings. I think it's a bit odd, especially because he then goes on to say that honor and gain are the cause of all the kleshas. I thought that can't be right. I think what happens is the kleshas distort honor and gain into something that makes the kleshas worse. So if you're proud and then you get honor and gain, you get prouder. But if you're not proud, then honor and gain won't make you proud. But of course, if you are proud, it will. It's kind of funny, isn't it? So if you've got a lot of desire for power and wealth, and you get power and wealth, then your desire for it will increase. But if you don't have much desire for it, there is a danger that once you've got it, you want more. But not necessarily. You might just think power and wealth. Oh, more ways to practice dana, more ways to practice Sheila, and which is implied here that if you do practice Sheila, you will get power and wealth. So if your motive is good, that will actually lead to further Sheila, further good results. The more power and wealth you get, the more good results you'll get. This comes up a lot in the Bodhisattva path, this wanting to have power and wealth in order to benefit others, in order to attract them, in order to do things for them, to inspire them, to get them together, and to, I suppose it would be like building a place like this, or a temple, or things that will actually benefit others. So that you shouldn't eschew wealth and honor if it's going to benefit others. So then Gampopa talks about the definition of Sheila being taking precepts, as I've talked about that already, and you could say the adhisthana of that, the blessing of that, taking it from somebody who's keeping it. The second thing he uses as a definition is that it is defined by pure motivation. So it's not, just keeping your word. If you've given a word to kind of destroy a nation or something, that would not be Sheila, although you would be using the power of your word, but it would be not Sheila in this context. Another thing is that if you, and this is what I was saying earlier, having taken that commitment or precept or vow or whatever it is, then when you're not able to keep it, you acknowledge that and you say so, and then you renew it. I think this is what I would call apology. If somebody says, well, I'll see you tomorrow at 12, and then they don't turn up, and when I next see them, they chat away to me as if everything's fine and I've been waiting around for them, I'm not very happy. But if next time I see them, or as soon as possible after, they say to me, I'm so sorry, please, I really meant to be there, and then whatever happened, I forgot or whatever, but, please, I really don't want to be like that. I don't want you to think of me like that. I don't want to behave like that in future. Please, please believe me. Then you can sort of think, you're like the universe, you think, okay, well, I'll give you another chance, I kind of, that makes sense. That's how I would feel, and it's an interesting thing, the idea that it comes up all the time in the 7 branches of the prayer, where you confess and you acknowledge, you could say I didn't live up to my ideal. I did do something that was negative. I recognize it, and I'm sorry, and I don't intend to do it again. And that actually does restore it. I think this is where in the West we are not convinced that it's restored. Whereas in the Buddhist context, it's definitely restored. Even if that other person doesn't believe you. The Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas believe you. And they will, acknowledge the fact that you didn't mean to do that, or at least you don't intend to do that again, and you want to restore that vow. They will restore it, and they'll keep you to it. It's not like they'll say, oh, well, you didn't keep it last time, I'm not going to listen to you this time. They're going to say, okay, as many times as you break it, if you restore it, you've got it. You're bound by it. You're bound by it, and you're bound to me by it, because you've made that to me. So I find that a really powerful thought, that even if other people don't forgive you, Buddhas and Bodhisattvas definitely will, because they can see that your repentance and your saying, I won't do it again, is the only way you will actually restore the power of your Sheila, and you need it. Every being needs that power. So it's really important. And then there's the 4th thing he mentions. So there's the taking of the precept, there's the pure motivation, there's the renewal if it's in any way damaged, and then mindfulness. And here mindfulness is used in the sense of being determined to be aware of what you do in order to prevent yourself sliding off whatever your Sheila is. So you notice if you've made you've got a Sheila against ill will, and you noticed ill will, then you repent the ill will, and then you make a very strong determination that I won't do it in the future. I really regret it. I see the harm it causes. I don't want anything to do with it. So by noticing that you did it, you can actually root it out. But of course, if you don't acknowledge or notice, if you haven't got the mindfulness or awareness to know what your mind's doing, then you haven't got any way forward. So that it's essential. I mean, there's a lot of talk about mindfulness in terms of stress reduction and all that kind of thing. But in the Buddhist context, the mindfulness is about noticing your behavior so that you can protect your own Sheila, that you can actually maintain Sheila. Oh, yes. Yes. So you, in general, I think there's something about you noticing what you have done and rejoice in the good and regret the negative. You notice what you are doing and cultivating the positive, and then you make an aspiration into the future that the negative not arise and that the positive actions will increase, so that you're constantly putting yourself into that framework of Sheila. That's the ground of mindfulness, really. So I think I've probably covered most of my points now, which is good since it's now past. Yes, he then goes on to talk in more detail about the different ways of taking the precepts. And gets a little bit technical sounding. I think I've... Oh yes, he even goes into something called pure... It goes into basically what I'd call good manners, including table manners. Impure actions, yes, he said. Sort of, furthermore, in order to create confidence and faith in others, this is a bodhisattva, and to prevent oneself from backsliding, you should avoid the impure actions of the 3 doors and sustain the 3 purities. And these were the kind of things Trungpa Rinpoche used to talk about. You know, like it does matter how you dress, how you behave, you know, the way you speak to people, you know. Yes, it does. There's a culturally determined one here. You should not sit with your legs outstretched. And obviously, there is some meaning that we don't have to don't rub your hands together. I'm not quite sure what that means in that context. But I think, you know, we get the idea that, you know, you act in a respectful way and you respect the customs of you know, because it's there's a kind of understanding built into, you know, the way we dress and the way we handle ourselves and handle situations. It's a bit like the chipped bowl thing, isn't it? Like you don't offer a guest a chipped bowl, do we? But I think just things like that, and even about, yes, boys have a smiling face. Sounds a bit creepy, doesn't it? Yeah, dangers of a lot of things, advice about talking, the way you talk, which is very much in line, as I said, with what we're trying to do. It's interesting that he associates this kind of behaviour with inspiring faith in others, isn't it? So if we're behaving in a coarse way, others would be put off even before they've even heard what we have to say. So that that's an interesting consideration. So then finally, the Sheila is increased and perfected through the prajna paramita, through the perfection of wisdom, and through dedication. These are the 2 things to remember. So to the extent that we can deepen our understanding of emptiness, you know, Heart Sutra, you know, nature of mind, that's going to increase the power of our Sheila and our dedication to keep remembering that before we start, to have that intention. So wake up in the morning with that intention, before you do anything, you can have that intention, or you can just remember that intention at any moment of the day and then dedicate it sort of regularly. After you've done any good action, or at the end of the day, dedicate it to remind. Well, in fact, it's not just reminding yourself. It actually has the power of a ritual, in the sense that when we dedicate it in that way, then actually we've done that to the universe. It will go to that end. It's not just training my mind to think that way. That's happened. I dedicated it to the enlightenment of all beings. It will actually have that effect. It will lead to the enlightenment of all beings. It won't. It can't not do. That's the nature of the universe. So that's the difference between a ritual and just a sort of wishful thinking. When you do the ritual, you change the universe. You make it so. And then it's really good to think your dedication is making it so. It's not just, that's a nice thought. Yeah. And the Buddhas, we're making it in front of the Buddhas, so they will make sure they will really empower it because of their presence and their power of Adhisthana. They will empower whatever we do with that motivation. So we're locking ourselves in more and more every time we dedicate in that way. I think we're more familiar with the opposite way around. Like if you sell your soul to the devil, from then on, everything you do, the devil will take advantage of and lead you down and down. It's just the opposite way around. You sold your soul to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, and they're going to make sure they're going to get you. They're going to take advantage of everything you do. So it's good to think that, it's not just, it's not just psychological, which I think is easy for us to think as Westerners. I'm training my own mind to be better, to have a more positive attitude, which is true, but it's nothing compared with what you're really doing. And so, final word about mandalas, where we were talking about generosity as the energy exchange. You can talk about Sheila as being almost, you could say, the structure of the mandala. It's its central principle, it's its boundary, it's its lines of communication from center to periphery, it's gateways, it's all the emotionality around those boundaries as well. I think you're very familiar with the fact that if you have a principle and it's being violated either by yourself or someone else, that's where you get emotional. Sort of like something is wrong, something is wrong, something is wrong, something's wrong, something's wrong. Yes, it's a boundary. And so once you've taken Sheila, and I think it goes from life to life actually. If you have a vow against killing and you try to kill something, you can't. The emotion is so strong, you just can't do it. It's like it protects you. It's like you're wearing it as armor. It's sometimes called armor of patience, or Sheila is the same really. You're wearing it, and the monk's robes as compared with armor. You're wearing your Sheila, and we could say the same. We're shielded by our Sheila. We're wearing our Sheila. It's in a way, it's our Sheila body. That defines our body more than our physical body actually. And so somebody looking at us, if they hit the Sheila, they know, what we're made of. Well, this person does not kill. This person, this is the kind of person this is, because they have this Sheila. So I'll end there really with the I don't know if anyone wanted to ask any questions. Not yet. Oh, yes.
It's just this ongoing curiosity about stepping from the first level to the second level, never mind the third level, spontaneous contact, but you know what you've just been talking about if I'm a person who doesn't kill, that's my body, that's my armor, and then we have a problem with rats or something like that. Just how to make that transition to that next level when the whole mandala is structured around.
Yeah, you have to recognize you're going to feel very, very uncomfortable. You're going to feel very emotional. You're going to feel very uncomfortable because, you know, this is against your Sheila. So it's very hard to do. But then, you know, causes and consequences, you choose them. Nobody's saying you should kill the rats, but actually you might think, you know, this is what I'm going to have to do, and it's going to be very painful because I have to go against my Sheila, and it's going to be very hard to do. It's almost if it isn't hard to do, then it's even more dangerous because something's fishy then, isn't it? It's almost like you don't want to not feel the dukkha of it, but then feeling the dukkha of it isn't non-dharma. I mean, that's your sensitivity and that, you know, your power to increase the power of your compassion and pranidhanas and everything else. So you're using that energy that in some ways feels very painful, but you're using it to, you know, deepen your dharma practice. So it is a notch up, isn't it? Because it feels much more comfortable just to keep a rule. And look down on other people who don't.
I remember some time ago on Buddhism Connect, I think someone raised a question about armed conflict, war, basically.
Yes, we did, didn't we?
Yeah, and I noticed the further along the path I go, the more confused I get. I start off very clear, right? You know, that's don't kill, blah, blah. And then now we're talking about rats, and then
you know, defending the country.
Yeah, and I realise I'm just. I think I have a view, and then the thinking is one thing, but being faced with the reality.
It's a very difficult issue. It's a very, very difficult issue. Like, you know, we're here now, able to practice Dharma because Hitler was defeated in that World War II. You could argue this way and that way about it. You know, like it would have. We don't know what would have happened if we hadn't done that. You know, if those people hadn't, you know, we hadn't stood up and had armed conflict. There was a lot of negative karma, which was quite unnecessary stuff that was done, that we did. That, you know, that it's terrible, some of the things we did that, you know, I don't believe were at all necessary. But to have actually stood up and fought, I kind of feel I'm glad people did that. I'm really glad. Even though that might be misguided, I don't really know. And what I find, the whole thing is just so uncomfortable because we don't know. I think I just come back to what the Buddha said. You know, this is samsara. It is painful. You know, that it's not fixable. So you could say, well, therefore you should defend your country. I don't think it's as easy as that. Okay, I think if you were a conscientious objector and you didn't go to war and you tried to stop the war, you would make good karma by doing that. Nonetheless, the country might well be overrun. And then you think, well, if you've made all the bad karma in defending it, what's the future? I mean, you could argue that way. But I don't think I would. I really don't. I've got a lot of respect for different views on this, to be honest. And I come back to, it is samsara. There is going to be suffering. As long as we have this karma for suffering, we will suffer. And then people on the karmic side will say, well, that's it. So if we kill, we will increase our bad karma. But I think, but not necessarily. If we're killing, out of a wish to protect others, it's not necessary that the weight of karma will be more on the side of, we might actually make so much good karma by that actually there is a future for this country. And certainly we've had a future since the end of the war, haven't we? I mean, look at all the advantages that we've had over the last 70 years. And here we are today. So, yeah, I mean, my grandfather was a pacifist in the First World War. It's really interesting. Maybe it's the karma of all the pacifists that have actually led to peace this last 70 years. In spite of all the, karma of the gung-ho, militarists. I think you just have to end up in a very uncomfortable position. And then you're really experiencing the dukkha of samsara. And then increase your aspiration to take all beings beyond the suffering of samsara, because it's always going to end up in this sort of situation. I must say, moral dilemmas, I think, are the worst. Like, I was listening to something the other day where somebody was saying, what is the right thing to do? I think it was a play about migrants, saying, what is the right thing to do? I just want to know the right thing to do and I'll do it. And I really identify with that, that. And yet there will be times when I will just have to live with not knowing. I just have to give it my best shot. Make lots of paridhanas. Because I think, things can turn out differently. If your motive is good, the possibilities of how that might actually impact on the situation is endless. So the situation is basically going to turn out according to the karma to our karma, basically. So the most important thing is the karma we're putting in. But as I was saying, that you need a kind of karmic consultancy agency to tell you what your best karmic options are. What are your karmic options? Different things could be equally good. I do believe that. In the long run. So in a way, we don't need to agonize endlessly, like saying, well, I don't know. We can just think, I don't know, so I'm going to do that. I must say Tibetans are very good at that. They're very decisive because they don't worry whether it's the one good option. It is a good option. I'm going to do that. Don't think too much about it or you'll go mad. I think, yes, I do it regularly. I hope that's helpful. This is an ongoing discussion, isn't it, really? Okay. We dedicate this punya to the enlightenment of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings realize complete and perfect awakening. May the heart's awareness awaken. Where it has begun to stir, may it never fade, and may it awaken fully. Kancha Samye Rinpoche Mache Panam Jeje Jeba Nyamba Mabada Kane Kande Kawasho Kancha Samye Rinpoche Mache Panam Jeje Jeba Nyamba Mabada Kane Kande Kawasho. It's a good topic, isn't it? Very important topic. It's funny, when I first thought, oh, I have to talk with Sheila this week, I thought, 5 precepts, 10 good actions. And actually, it was much more than that, wasn't it? Yeah. That's good. Thank you. Thank you for your interest and your Sheila.